Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 20th of November. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, no matter what part of Alaska you're in. You can use that easily on Marine VHF or NOAA Weather Radio. Head to arh.noaa.gov, the weather info line at 800-472-0391. You can find us on weather.gov/Alaska, of course. It takes you to the same place, NWS Alaska on our Facebook page, or on Twitter under NWS Alaska, NWS Fairbanks, NWS Anchorage, or NWS Juneau. If you look for the AKwx tag on tweets, that'll also find more people talking about Alaska weather, and we encourage you to use that hashtag when you do the same. And on YouTube, of course, in the afternoon, you can get your daily afternoon map briefing around 4 o'clock or so. You can find that on the NWS Anchorage channel there and get a kind of a sneak peek of what we're going to talk about here on Alaska weather before we get into Alaska weather itself. Here's your Alaska weather headlines now. Blizzard warnings are in effect for the central and eastern Beaufort seacoast. Those will go until about 9 o'clock to midnight across the northern coastline, thanks to blowing winds with gusts up to 45 to 50 miles per hour. Reduced visibility should be expected. On top of that, though, it has been snowing, and places like Barrow have picked up several inches of snow now, and it looks like the actual ground cover, the depth right now, is around 6 inches. Look for the winds to continue as we go through the next couple days, and as that slowly subsides into the weekend, there may still be some areas of blowing and drifting snow, and we'll take that as it comes. Right now, blizzard warnings remain in effect there for the Beaufort seacoast. Dense fog over Juneau and northern sections of southeast are expected. That will continue until around midnight tonight. Look for poor visibility there as high pressure is trying to bring in some more stable air, at least to the northern parts of southeast. The strong Gulf low will lose strength as it meanders back into southwestern Alaska and the eastern Bering Sea into the weekend. And we're expecting a pattern change to slowly develop toward the end of November and into early December. So for those of you, especially across south central and southwestern coastal areas, and even the west coast for that matter, that have been saying, where is the cold weather? I'm losing ice. Well, maybe by the end of November and early December we'll have enough of a change that we'll be talking more about snow rather than rain or melting conditions there. So here's the weather setup as it goes as we move into the western Bering Sea with our satellite picture here. You'll notice across the Bering and across the southwestern sections of Alaska, we're still dealing with that north and easterly offshore flow. The main core of the jet stream is taking us across the North Pacific and really pushing the bulk of the moisture well to our south. This is the really active zone here, the main conveyor belt of weather south of the Gulf of Alaska. However, we're still caught up in this large-scale area of low pressure that's working moisture and storm energy right across southwestern Alaska, and it's banked an area of low pressure very close to Kodiak Island, and the result of that has kept northerly winds moving across the Aleutians, and at times pushed a lot of water through places like Dutch Harbor. Another quarter inch of rain or so fell there today, as well as northerly winds still working through the region, and some gusty winds there across the Alaska Peninsula as well. The rest of the great Alaska region here, it shows that southeasterly flow working up across the eastern and northern sections of the Gulf. A frontal boundary obviously moving north and east with that. Low pressure here sitting just south and east of Sand Point, and some of the heavier rainfall moving through the Kodiak area today. As the front moves northward and westward slowly, it will begin to weaken as this low pressure system fills in a little bit more. It's going to lose its frontal characteristics, but it will still be bringing that south and easterly flow through southeast Alaska, through the northern coast, and that wet and unstable weather through Bristol Bay and parts of the central and eastern chain. Across the north, though, a lot of those darker clouds that you're seeing here is really just cold air showing up on the satellite picture, and as a result of that, we're not really talking about cloud cover here north of Fairbanks at all. For places like Northway today, temperatures dropped to 10 below earlier this morning. It was a very chilly morning, obviously, and one of the coldest in the entire state. Just to the north of that, though, we've got cloud cover running into and around the periphery of high pressure that's been dropping south out of the Arctic. And this is where a lot of the stronger winds are. This is where we're seeing those gusts in order of 40 to 50 miles per hour, poor visibility there, and the blizzard warnings that remain in effect at this point. Your surface weather conditions then show high pressure out across the central Yukon, low pressure just south and west of Sitka at 996 millibars. Pocket of rain there around Haida Gwaii, that's moving northward. Low pressure south and west of Kodiak, also down to about 952 millibars. This is the major weather maker in the region right now. As that continues to lift northward, it's going to keep the southeasterly winds a little bit stronger across the Kenai Peninsula and into Prince William Sound. It's also going to start to generate a stronger ribbon of air across the northern Gulf Coast and probably around into northern parts of southeast as well. As that frontal boundary lifts northward and begins to weaken, that northeasterly flow will become more of a north and northwesterly flow for the central and eastern Aleutians. Meanwhile, cold and dry air still sitting across the upper Yukon Valley, and pockets of snow and blowing snow will continue across the northern coast. Look for that to continue tonight as well, with blizzard warnings still in effect. Periods of snow showers will be found across the western Alaska Range and across parts of the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. Chances are, though, for many right along the coast and certainly just offshore, you'll be dealing with a better chance for rain than snow. Areas of showers across the central and western chain. The lows back to 956 millibars now, and the front continues trekking northward. Pockets of rain possible across southeastern Alaska, especially along the coastal areas. That should pick up into Friday. As the front moves northward, it will probably generate some snow showers across some of the higher terrain around Haines and Skagway and points north. But there is a substantial amount of dry air across the interior and points northward there, with high pressure just across the border there around the northern sections of Yukon at 1,017 millibars. So a wealth of dry, a wealth of cold sitting right along the middle and upper Yukon Valley. Now, low pressure's backed up a little bit more now north and west of False Pass and Cold Bay, and it's filling into 961 millibars. We're back in that northerly flow for the Aleutians and for the central and western chain. That's more of a north and even northeasterly flow for Shemya, Adak, and Atka. The best chance for any precipitation will start dropping southward of Bethel as we get into Friday. There'll still be some scattered areas of rain mixed with snow, and that includes south central Alaska around the Kenai Peninsula. Expect more of the higher terrain there, perhaps south of the Sterling Highway. Pockets of rain and snow showers there. Kodiak, you'll be flirting with periods of rain and then maybe pockets of drier weather as some of the heavier precipitation backs off to the west just a little bit. And southeast, with the frontal boundary moving through, you're still looking at a decent onshore flow. Look for that trend to continue as we go into the weekend. And by Saturday, expect pockets of light rainfall still scattered around southeastern Alaska. Drier conditions for parts of Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Valley, and 975 millibar low by early in the weekend. That will be just south and west of False Pass and Cold Bay. Northerlies continue to run in through Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, and central and northwesterly winds out across the central and western chain, and dry weather prevails across the north. We're still looking at the possibility of some stronger gusts there right along the Beaufort seacoast for the central and eastern areas especially. Now here's a look at how things shaped up as far as the temperatures went today. You'll notice most areas in southeast were generally in the upper 30s to lower 40s. Around Sitka, 40 degrees, 35 around Juneau, 41 around Heidelberg, Petersburg, 36 around Hyder, and 40 in Sitka. 31 today in Yakutat, a little bit cooler there. Mid to upper 30s for parts of Prince William Sound as you got down the coast towards Seward and Homer. Temperatures were in the lower to mid 40s for south central Alaska from the northern parts of the Cook Inlet all the way down toward even the Barren Islands. Temperatures were really different, about 10 to 15 degrees difference from Anchorage all the way down toward Homer. 11 degrees in Fairbanks today, 19 in Eagle, 6 in Northway, 24 around Fort Greely, 25 for Healy, and temperatures even further north were dropping into the lower to mid-teens today. Around Fort Yukon it was 12 degrees, and you can see areas around Amblers and Bettles were both in the teens to about 30 degrees or so. 32 degrees was the reading there in Squentna, and looking northward still, if you can give me a little, there we go. Temps in the mid-teens around Barrow out toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, about 14 degrees, 16 in Kaktovik. Kivalina and Shishmaref, we're looking at temperatures in the mid-20s, 35 in Nome, 31 in Unalakleet, down toward Bethel, 32 degrees. The southwestern coast, including Bristol Bay, lower to mid-40s around King Salmon and Dillingham, milder especially around King Salmon at 47. Kodiak was looking at temperatures in the mid-40s, with the Pribilofs holding around 39 to 40 degrees. Southwestern Alaska, especially the Alaska Peninsula, was holding at or below 45 degrees. Sand Point about 45 today. Adak and Atka both at 41. 39 in Shemya, and 42 around Dutch Harbor, Unalaska. There, a decent day with northerly winds and, again, about a 1/4 inch of rain, so pretty normal for having a low pressure system just to your east. Overnight low temperatures will be the coldest in the interior, single digits and low to mid-teens for most areas. Fort Yukon could be one of the colder spots if you don't factor in Northway at 3 below, so another cold night coming for you. 30s and low 40s for a good chunk of southeast, upper 20s and lower 30s for south central. Kodiak looking at a temp just under 40 degrees. Low to mid-teens for the Arctic coast. The Seward Peninsula in the mid to upper 20s. Southwest, expect temps in the upper 20s and lower 30s with King Salmon and Dillingham both in the upper 30s there. Bethel probably closer to 30. Southwest in the upper 30s, and most of the Aleutians will be in the mid-30s overnight. High temperatures tomorrow, probably in the low to mid-teens for most of the interior. Not a huge change from what you see overnight. Southeast, expect highs in the lower to mid-40s. Some of the warmest weather around Ketchikan and Annette all the way down toward probably Sitka, about 46 degrees. Pretty close to what you'll see there in Kodiak as well. South Central expecting high temperatures in the mid-30s. Southwest at or above 40 degrees all the way down through the Alaska Peninsula. Lower 40s for the chain. Nome, you're looking at 34. Fairbanks, mid-teens, and the Arctic coast again in the teens to lower 20s with the warmest weather around the Chukchi Seacoast. Flying weather includes MVFR conditions for most of southeast. You'll find some IFR conditions south and west of Castle Cape all the way down the Horn almost to Sand Point. And for the Beaufort Seacoast, especially along coastal areas, do plan for IFR conditions as blizzard conditions, and at least some strong gusts and blowing and drifting snow will likely continue throughout the daytime tomorrow. Let's check your pass conditions, and as we go throughout the daytime across Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect conditions to be generally VFR throughout the day. We don't expect a whole lot of problems there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should start at IFR, trending toward MVFR throughout the day. Rainy Pass will see marginal conditions trending toward VFR, and it looks like Windy Pass will probably go marginal throughout the day, heading for VFR conditions throughout your Friday afternoon. Isabel Pass, expect VFR throughout the day. And Tasta Pass looks to be visual throughout most of your Friday as well. And Tanita Pass we're going to call visual through most of your day. Once we get through Portage Pass, probably IFR conditions there with MVFR developing by late afternoon. And for Chilkoot and White Pass, again, there could be some snow showers in the area. We're going to call it marginal through most of your Friday. Freezing levels shows warmer air is trying to work its way up through some of the southern sections of southeastern Alaska. The surface freezing line just dancing around the northern and eastern parts of the Gulf, and then taking a quick jog up through the Bering Strait. Very warm conditions again for this time of the year, with 2,000 to 4,000 foot freezing levels over the Yukon and Kuskokwim valleys. And you can see the warmer air is starting to retreat, though. Again, this is a sign that maybe we're in for a pattern change in the next several weeks. Icing potential, we've got a ribbon of moisture lingering right across the northern and eastern Gulf, anywhere from about 5,000 to 7,000 feet and above, so you're going to have to get up there a little bit. Light to isolated moderate still possible across southwestern Alaska, the south and western sections of the Alaska Peninsula, and above 3,000 feet there. And then west of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs, there's some pockets of moist and cold air, probably above 5,000 feet or so. Most of that's going to be light to isolated moderate. You may run into some icing potential here and certainly poor visibility across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Most of that, though, is simply blowing and drifting snow at this point. Here's a jet stream, low pressure, and the major weather maker across the Gulf being driven by a low pressure system in the upper atmosphere across southwestern Alaska. Not a whole lot of really fast-moving wind around it. Remember that fast-moving river of air that we were talking about in the satellite picture? It's right here. This is the main jet stream, and this is just south of the Gulf of Alaska, and then takes a big jog across the west coast and really driving all that cold weather that we've been hearing about in the news across the lower 48. The Arctic jet also is driving a lot of cold air across northern parts of Canada. But for us, we're just kind of almost stuck in the doldrums a little bit. As this system slowly falls apart, the pattern will eventually trend toward colder weather again, but that's probably a good half week or so away. 9,000 feet, low pressure sitting just outside of Bristol Bay, dragging in that north and westerly flow across the Alaska Peninsula and the central chain. West and southwesterly winds moving across the eastern Gulf, 20, 40, maybe even 35 knots at times coming in from the west and southwest. And generally light winds across the interior at this level, but they do pick up crossing over the Seward Peninsula between 20 and about 30 knots, and easterlies continue at this level for the Beaufort Seacoast. One reason, again, for a lot of windy support across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. They get stronger at 3,000 feet, in fact. 40 knot winds expected there. East and northerly winds coming across the western coast. Low pressure pretty much in the same place. And you can see the winds fanning out coming across the Gulf with wind speeds between 10 and about 25 knots coming into southeastern Alaska. Across Adak and Atka and just about to Nikolsky, wind speeds come up to around 40 knots. And over the Pribilofs, 3,000 feet, you're talking about northerlies from 30 to about 40 knots, and the same could be said for any areas in Norton Sound all the way down the southwestern coast. So probably looking at some choppy weather there. Here's a look at turbulence potential then, factoring that all in. The biggest trouble spots that we see at this point probably across southwestern Alaska tomorrow, below 4,000 feet. Some of that could ramp up to occasional moderate somewhere south of the Bethel area to about Dillingham. Below 4,000 feet, expect some occasional to maybe even widespread moderate there across the central and eastern Brooks Range. We've got two opposing weather systems, high pressure in the north, and then we've got our low pressure system in the south. There's a lot of air moving right across the Brooks Range at this point. And then across southeast, remember we've got our front moving northward, so as that happens, we're probably going to get some gusts there moving through some of the channeled terrain. And as that front continues to move northward and slowly fall apart, we're going to have some opposing wind fields that'll probably stir things up a little bit as we go into the next 24 hours. That's a look at your aviation forecast. In just a few minutes, we'll take a look at your marine weather forecast and recap the day's weather here. Stay with us.
Cassiopeia, queen of the northern sky.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury.
And I'm Dean Regas, and we're here to help you be sure you know what you're seeing in the night sky when you look up.
It's that time of year again when our old friend, the Big Dipper, gives up its role as an easy early evening indicator of north. Because if you happen to live toward the south, the Big Dipper is barely visible above the northern horizon in early evening.
But fear not, my friends, the Big Dipper's position high above the North Star is replaced by a fascinating ancient constellation, Cassiopeia the Queen, and she has quite a story. Well, let's show you. Okay, if you go out any night around 9 p.m., you'll see the 5 bright stars of Cassiopeia, which, if we connect with imaginary lines, trace out the letter M. But you might ask yourself, how could anyone imagine seeing a queen in this simple M shape?
Well, around 2,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks had no problem identifying this modern M as the queen named Cassiopeia. And if we speed up time a few hours to about 6 a.m., you can understand how our ancestors imagined a queen here. What they saw was a queen sitting majestically on her throne. And if we use one extra star in this constellation and draw lines between it and the middle star of the M, we have the seat of the throne. The 2 stars above it make up the back of the throne, and 2 additional lines make up the legs of the throne. And all you have to do is imagine someone like a great queen sitting on it.
But as everyone knows, because our Earth rotates on its axis every 24 hours, the stars change their positions in the sky, circling endlessly around the North Star. And at 6 a.m. any morning this week, Queen Cassiopeia sits upright, very nicely on her throne. But as the hours go by, she slowly wheels around the North Star, even as the Earth turns during the day, so that by evening time, once again, Cassiopeia would have to be wearing an extra strong seatbelt to keep her from falling off her queenly throne.
But why, you might ask, would our ancestors want to see a favorite queen of theirs, who was said to be the most beautiful woman of her time, in such a precarious position? Well, it is precisely because of this ever-changing position of Cassiopeia's throne that she was placed in the sky in the first place. You see, Cassiopeia was placed in the heavens as an object lesson against personal vanity.
20 centuries ago, the story was told that Cassiopeia was not only exceptionally beautiful, but exceptionally vain, and that one day she made the dreadful mistake of boasting that she was even more beautiful than the Nereids, the sea nymphs who were considered to be the hottest stuff of their time. Well, they complained to their father Poseidon, the god of the sea, and it's said that among the punishments he rendered the royal family, he condemned Queen Cassiopeia to ride endlessly around the North Star on her throne, sometimes comfortably right side up, and then later on uncomfortably upside down, where she'd have to hang on for dear life.
This precarious position was designed as a punishment for Cassiopeia, and ever since, mere mortals have known that physical beauty always comes with a price, something that Dean and I know all too well, right, Dean?
Yeah, that's right, James. Now, of course, we wouldn't want Cassiopeia to think this show is all about her, so let's see what the planets are doing.
Okay, we have our skies set up for any time this week just after sunset. As the days pass, you'll notice the red planet Mars drifting slowly through the constellation of Sagittarius, the Centaur Archer. You can identify this area of the sky by looking for 8 bright stars that outline what looks like a teapot.
As we get closer to November 25th, you'll notice a slender waxing crescent moon cozy up to Mars. It'll be on the right-hand side of Mars on the night of the 25th and to the left of Mars on the night of the 26th.
And for you early morning planet watchers, Jupiter will be high overhead in the constellation of Leo the Lion.
And caught in the glare of the sun, Saturn will be making its return to the morning sky.
So get outside and behold all the wonder that awaits you as you keep looking up.
All right, time now for your marine weather forecast. Starting in southeast as always, we'll still be dealing with some northerly winds and that colder air that's draining down. One of the reasons we're looking at dense fog advisories going until midnight for some areas around Juneau. As we get into a little bit further south in the inner waterways there, you get much stronger southeasterly flow. There's a frontal boundary working its way northward, and some of those winds across the Clarence Strait could come upwards of 40 knots or so. Look for 8-foot seas there, and once you get toward the coastal areas, it's more of an offshore flow, especially north of Sitka. Easterlies around 35 knots with seas around 17 to 19 feet. Just south and west of Craig, you're looking at southwesterlies coming in to about 25 knots with a 17-foot sea. Now across most of the areas on Saturday, more of a southerly flow develops. Again, as that frontal boundary is working its way northward, we still have northerlies coming through the Lynn Canal. 20-knot winds with a 4-foot sea. Southeasterlies coming through the inner waterways around 20 knots with 4-foot seas there. Coastal areas are talking more about 13-foot seas across most of the coast, well, anywhere from Yakutat really all the way down to Craig and the Dixon entrance, with those southerlies upwards of 20 knots or so. Again, that'll be on Saturday. Across south central now, we're still looking at that frontal boundary working northward, and in this case we're getting more of an easterly flow coming through Prince William Sound and the north and western Gulf. 20 to 30 knot winds there, 4-foot seas on the inside, 19-foot seas on the outside, 18 to 20-foot seas expected outside of Resurrection Bay and the western Gulf. Southerlies coming into the eastern side of Kodiak, and northeasterlies are coming down Cook Inlet all the way past the Barren Islands and into Shelikof Strait around 25 to 30 knots or so. By Saturday, we're expecting these winds to change just a little bit, diminishing in the Cook Inlet from 15 to 25 knots. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, south and easterly flow coming into the north and western Gulf, and light easterly flow crossing Shelikof Strait with a 14-foot sea there. Seas in the north and western Gulf around 10 to 12 knots, with seas diminishing to 3 feet inside of Prince William Sound. So slightly improved weather as we get into Saturday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, an easterly flow inside of Bristol Bay at 18-foot seas are expected there. Northerlies north of Cold Bay, and then westerly flow south of King Cove and Sand Point with 16-foot seas. Southerlies coming into Castle Cape down to Chignik with an 18-foot sea expected on Friday. By Saturday, northeasterlies are coming down the north side of the Alaska Peninsula from Bristol Bay with 5-foot seas there, 7-foot seas north of Cold Bay on a 20 to 25 knot wind, and south and southwesterly flow on the Pacific side with 15-foot seas expected there as we start up the weekend. Again, that frontal boundary and low pressure system parked just right about in here. So again, that's the reason for all the changes. On Friday, north and westerly flow coming in from Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, all the way to Nikolsky, all the way out towards Shemya on about 25 to 30 knot winds or so. 11 to 13-foot seas at their greatest point from the central and eastern chain. And across the Pacific side, expect 10 to 13-foot seas there with winds around 25 to 30 knots from the north and the west. As we get into Saturday, north and westerly flow continues for the central and eastern chain. Winds still running around 30 knots or so. You'll get down to about 25 knots out across Kiska and Shemya with seas around 11 to 12 feet. Northerlies into Unalaska, and a 14-foot sea there around Nikolsky out toward Adak and Atka. Still looking at that north and westerly flow for your Saturday. So not a whole lot's going to change for you. As we get across the west, freezing spray starts to show up as generally north of St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, a north and westerly flow continues there for St. Lawrence Island out toward St. Matthew. And then we get more of an offshore flow north of Amonuk toward Macoriac. You're looking at winds around 30 to 40 knots at their greatest, 11-foot seas outside of Kuskokwim Bay, 12-foot seas around the Pribilofs. For Saturday, expect that cold weather to continue across St. Lawrence Island. So again, freezing spray still an issue there around the Seward Peninsula. Offshore winds continue. Really, the directions don't change a lot as we get into the first part of the weekend. And you're looking at 11-foot seas around St. Lawrence Island. Northerlies continue around St. Matthew Island with a 13-foot sea, and northeasterlies outside of Kuskokwim Bay with a 25-knot wind, 10-foot seas around the Pribilofs there with a 25-knot wind. Now across the northern coast, we expect easterlies to continue, and we're just going to jump that map there, but generally the good news is that not a whole lot's going to change from Friday into Saturday. We're still talking about gusty easterly winds that are around 40 knots or so tomorrow across the Kaktovik area. And what that means is generally the central and eastern Beaufort seacoast probably still dealing with some very near or let's say poor visibility across Prudhoe Bay out toward Kaktovik. And blizzard conditions may be warranted once again, so be careful there. And then north of the Seward Peninsula, you're still talking about northerlies around 25 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas as we get into Saturday afternoon. And freezing spray is still going to be an issue there as we get into the Chukchi Seacoast. So anywhere south and west of the ice edge will still have some problems. Pardon me. Now as we get into tonight again, recapping tonight's weather, 956 millibar low. Still sitting south and west of Bristol Bay. Still cranking up the weather here across the eastern Bering Sea coast. You'll see pockets of rain and certainly some gusty northerly winds across the central and eastern chain. The frontal boundary is working northward, and as it does so, it's weakening, but it's still stirring up the weather for southeast. You got a dense fog advisory for northern parts of the southeast tonight. And then blizzard warnings continue for the central and eastern Beaufort seacoast. Those will go at least until midnight tonight. And chances are with some gusty winds there, poor visibility may still be a threat. It may not be as bad as what you're experiencing right now, but conditions will still not be terribly pleasant as we get into your Friday and your Saturday for that matter. Now into south central, I'll look for scattered areas of snow showers across some of the higher terrain. A better chance for a rain and snow mix across southwestern Alaska's coastline. The frontal boundary will jog northward a little bit more, but most of the interior, especially north of the Yukon Valley, dealing with dry weather as we get into Friday and again on Saturday. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather, and we'll see you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.